They told the world it was a victory for players. A historic agreement. A settlement that would bring justice. Cameras flashed as lawyers shook hands. Press releases spoke of accountability. Billions of dollars were mentioned. And the NFL smiled. They said the past was finally being addressed. They said the future would be safer. They said the league had learned. But beneath the headlines, another story was being buried. A story written in fine print, hidden behind legal language, designed not to heal, but to protect. Players listened with hope. Families felt a sense of closure. Retired athletes believed the nightmare was ending. They trusted the system. They trusted the shield. They trusted the league they gave their bodies to. What they didn't know was that the settlement was never built for them. It was built to control damage, to limit responsibility, to close doors forever. This wasn't justice. It was containment. A carefully engineered escape route. A way out that cost the league money, but saved it from the truth. The settlement wasn't the end. It was the beginning of another silence. Before this story continues, understand one thing. This settlement wasn't designed to protect players. It was designed to protect power. If you want investigations the league avoids, subscribe to Dark Side of the NFL. White heavy check mark. The numbers sounded enormous. $1 billion. A figure designed to shock, to reassure fans, to quiet critics, to dominate headlines. But numbers lie when context is missing. That billion wasn't guaranteed. It wasn't evenly distributed. It wasn't even enough. Thousands of players would apply. Only a fraction would qualify. Many would be rejected. Others would die waiting. The settlement came with conditions. Strict medical definitions. Narrow diagnostic windows. Complex scoring systems. CTE itself wasn't included. The very disease at the center of the scandal. Excluded entirely. If you didn't fit the checklist, you got nothing. Memory loss wasn't enough. Depression wasn't enough. Suicidal thoughts weren't enough. Families watched their loved ones fade, only to be told they didn't meet the criteria. The system wasn't broken. It was designed this way. Every rejection saved money. Every delay reduced payouts. Time became the league's greatest ally. Because dead players don't file appeals. White heavy checkmark lawyers called it a compromise. Players called it betrayal. Many didn't fully understand what they signed. They trusted their representatives. They trusted the process. They trusted the promise of fairness. But buried deep inside the agreement was a permanent shield. Once you accepted the settlement, you gave up the right to sue. Forever. No future claims. No new evidence. No reopening the case. Even if science evolved. Even if the truth became undeniable. The door was closed. Locked behind legal language. Written to protect an institution. Not the men who built it. Some players refused to sign. They kept fighting. They kept speaking. And they were isolated. Ignored. Outspent. Dragged through endless courtrooms. The settlement didn't bring peace. It divided the victims. Those who took the deal. And those who chose the truth. The NFL didn't need to win every case. It just needed time. And the settlement gave it exactly that. White heavy checkmark doctors became gatekeepers, not healers. Independent exams were required. But independence was an illusion. The league approved the system. The league approved the standards. Race-based formulas quietly appeared. Black players were held to different baselines. Lower expectations. Lower cognitive starting points. Which meant less compensation. Or none at all. The same hits. The same damage. But different outcomes. When this was exposed, the NFL denied intent. Blamed outdated science. Promised revisions. But years had already passed. Claims had already been denied. Lives had already unraveled. Families asked how this was possible. How discrimination survived inside a justice agreement. The answer was simple. No one was watching closely enough. Oversight was minimal. Appeals were slow. And the burden of proof always rested on the broken. The settlement wasn't neutral. It reflected a system built by power, for power, and those without it paid the price. White heavy checkmark behind closed doors. The league celebrated stability. Sponsors stayed. Ratings climbed. The narrative shifted. From crisis to closure. Fans were told the issue was resolved. Media coverage softened. Investigations faded. The shield remained polished. Meanwhile, former players disappeared from the spotlight, living in pain, confusion, isolation. Some couldn't remember their children. Others couldn't escape rage or despair. The settlement didn't fund long-term care. It didn't guarantee support. It didn't provide dignity. It provided silence. Because silence was cheaper. Because silence didn't threaten revenue. Because silence didn't scare advertisers. The NFL learned something crucial. You don't need to deny harm. You just need to manage it. Delay it. Complicate it. Until the public moves on. And most did. Because football never stopped. And that was the point. If this feels uncomfortable, that's not accidental. Silence only survives when people look away. Leave a like, share this video, and help push this story past controlled narratives. White heavy checkmark widows became investigators. Children became advocates. Families pieced together stories. Through medical records, autopsy reports, and fragments of memory. Many learned about CTE only after death. Only when the brain was opened. Only when it was too late. They asked why warnings weren't given earlier. Why helmets didn't change sooner. Why practices stayed violent. Why players weren't protected. The settlement had no answers. It only had forms, deadlines, and denials. Grief was met with bureaucracy. Pain was met with paperwork. Justice was replaced by procedure. And every denied claim sent a clear message. This is not about healing. This is about limits. Limits on responsibility. Limits on exposure. Limits on truth. The settlement closed cases. But it never closed wounds. White heavy checkmark scientists warned the league decades earlier. Internal studies existed. Data was collected. Patterns were clear. But disclosure was dangerous. Acknowledgement meant liability. So doubt was manufactured. Research was questioned. Independent voices were sidelined. The league promoted uncertainty. As if the science were unsettled. As if the damage were speculative. This strategy wasn't new. It had been used before. By tobacco. By asbestos. By anyone protecting profit. Delay became policy. Confusion became defense. And the settlement followed that blueprint. By admitting nothing, while paying something, enough to look responsible, not enough to change behavior. The NFL never said it was wrong. It said it was moving forward. But forward without accountability is just avoidance. And avoidance was written into every clause of the agreement. Current players watched closely. They saw what happened to the retired. They learned the cost of speaking openly. They learned which stories were welcomed and which were ignored. Contracts didn't guarantee safety. They guaranteed replaceability. Injured players were cycled out. New bodies took their place. The machine never slowed, because the settlement reassured the system. It said the worst was over. It signaled to owners that the storm had passed. But inside locker rooms, fear remained. Players hid symptoms. They minimized pain. They stayed silent, because the lesson was clear. The league protects itself first. And when your usefulness ends, so does its concern. White heavy checkmark. Some journalists tried to keep digging. They followed court documents, medical journals, personal testimonies. But access comes at a price. And pressure is subtle. Critical voices lose invitations, lose sources, lose airtime. The settlement gave media an exit, a convenient conclusion, a reason to move on. But truth doesn't end with agreements. It lingers. It resurfaces. It waits. In the stories of those forgotten. In the lives permanently altered. In the families still searching for accountability. The NFL didn't silence everyone. It didn't need to. It only needed enough silence to keep the game going. White heavy checkmark. The settlement was marketed as closure. But closure without truth is illusion. It allowed the league to say enough, without ever saying sorry. It replaced accountability with finality. Once signed, questions were no longer welcome. The past became legally inconvenient. The future became the focus. But futures built on silence still carry the weight of harm. The league positioned itself as evolved, as if evolution erased responsibility, as if progress absolved delay. But moral debt does not expire. It accumulates. Every player denied, every family dismissed, added interest to that debt. The settlement froze liability, not conscience. And conscience doesn't answer to contracts. It answers to history. The league tried to outrun that judgment, with innovation, with marketing, with spectacle. But history moves patiently, and it remembers who chose protection over people. White heavy checkmark. The fans were never asked if this was enough. They were told it was settled. They were reassured. They were distracted. Sunday after Sunday, the violence was reframed as safer, the risk as controlled, the responsibility as shared. But shared responsibility often means no responsibility at all. The league relied on emotional investment, on loyalty passed through generations. Questioning felt like betrayal, and that feeling was cultivated because loyalty is profitable and doubt is dangerous. The settlement preserved that loyalty. It kept the illusion intact that the league had done the right thing, even as evidence continued to surface, even as former players declined, even as new cases emerged. The system held, not because it was just, but because it was convenient. White heavy checkmark. Some truths refused to stay buried. Court challenges exposed cracks. Race-based scoring became public. Denials were reconsidered. Pressure mounted. But reform came slowly. Too slowly. And only after damage was done. The league promised corrections. But promises don't restore health. They don't bring back memory. They don't undo years of neglect. The settlement was adjusted, but never redefined. Its purpose remained the same. Contain exposure. Limit liability. Control narrative. The NFL wanted this chapter closed. But chapters don't close themselves. They are judged. And this one remains unresolved. Because justice delayed is not justice denied. It is justice avoided. White heavy checkmark. The settlement asked players to move on. But many never could. Their bodies carried the past forward. Every forgotten name, every sudden mood swing, every sleepless night was a reminder that damage does not respect legal boundaries. The league wanted certainty, final numbers, closed books. But human lives are not spreadsheets. They don't end neatly. They deteriorate slowly. Public statements spoke of responsibility. Private actions spoke of containment. The NFL framed the settlement as generosity. But generosity does not come with silence clauses. It does not come with exclusions. It does not come with expiration dates. This agreement was never about healing. It was about insulation. Protecting ownership. Protecting future revenue. Protecting the brand from precedent. The league knew one open door could lead to many more. So it sealed them all and called it resolution. White heavy checkmark. What makes this settlement unforgivable is not just what it excluded, but what it prevented. Future truth, future accountability, future justice. Science evolves, knowledge deepens, but the agreement froze responsibility in time. Even as understanding expanded, even as CTE became undeniable, players who signed were locked out, their suffering capped by paperwork, their truth capped by clauses. The league anticipated this moment. It planned for future discoveries, and protected itself in advance. This was not negligence. It was foresight, calculated and deliberate. The NFL didn't lose control. It secured it, at the expense of those who had already paid with their health, and would continue paying, long after the checks stopped coming. White heavy check mark, so when history looks back, it won't see a settlement of justice. It will see a strategy, a way to survive exposure, without admitting fault. The NFL knew the risks. It knew the science. It knew the consequences. And when forced to respond, it chose limitation over honesty, containment over care, profit over people. The game moved on. The league thrived. But the damage remained. In silent homes, in broken families, in lives that never recovered. This settlement closed lawsuits, not wounds. It ended legal battles, not suffering. And as long as football is played, under the shadow of that choice, the question will remain, not whether the NFL paid enough, but whether it ever intended to tell the truth at all. The NFL closed lawsuits. It didn't close wounds. If you don't want stories like this buried, subscribe to Dark Side of the NFL. More investigations are coming.